So good evening and welcome everyone to the MHCH Housing Justice Educational Forum, Making Housing Happen for Developmentally Disabled People. With us tonight to talk about making housing happen for developmentally disabled people are Patricia Herrera, Regional Manager for the California State Council on Developmental Disabilities, San Bernardino Regional Office, Peter Mendoza of the California State Council on Developmental Disabilities, Sacramento Regional Office, Daniel Schenkel, CEO of the California Housing Foundation and President of the Lanterman Housing Alliance, and Chris Detling, Senior Director of Real Estate Development for Able Light, California. Before we get to them, though, I'm going to do a brief reflection and then give a report on making housing and community happen, our initiatives, talk about what we're doing. So let me start with a brief reflection. We are a faith-rooted interfaith organization, so we often start our meetings with a spiritual reflection. So I'm going to share my screen here. Oh, Anthony, can you give me screen sharing capabilities? Excellent, thanks. Okay. Right. Okay, so Jesus said in Matthew 25, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it to me." He said this at a time when talking about the least and the greatest was very common in that society. Of course, we do that today in different ways. This may seem blunt to us, but we do it in different ways in our society. Part of the gospel message was flipping this around. The first will be last and the last will be first. The greatest will be everyone's servant. Some people call it the great reversal in the gospel. Jesus was saying that those who are the most vulnerable, we should treat them as we treat Jesus himself. And so, people with developmental disabilities are often are some of the most vulnerable people in our society and most easily forgotten at times. So I think Jesus would tell us that we need to treat them just as we treat Jesus himself. Truly, I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it to me. So with that, I want to talk about what's happening at MHCH. So making housing and community happen, we have a very small staff. We're located here in Pasadena, California. We have only 4 paid staff, all part-time. A couple of them are only 4 hours a week. And then Jill and Anthony are full-time volunteers who do the bulk of the work, but they're not paid. So we're a very small organization, but we have tons of volunteers that do a lot of different things. And some of them work on 4 of our teams, and that's mostly what I'm going to talk about here. So first, we have our safe parking team. There are about 15,000 people who live in their vehicles in Los Angeles County. But until 2 years ago, there was no safe parking program in the San Gabriel Valley. But as of April 1st, 2021, about 2 years ago, we launched the first safe parking program in the San Gabriel Valley. We did that with Trinity Lutheran Church here in Pasadena, which is the host church, the host site, and Foothill Unity Center, which provides services. So this pilot program provides 5 safe places to park, has access to a bathroom, which is in the church building, has case management provided by Foothill Unity Center, and mental health treatment, and referrals to things like permanent housing. So several people have gotten into permanent housing through this program. If you want to volunteer with this program, contact Wendy McGrail. Her email is wendybmcgrail@gmail.com. If you know someone who's living in their vehicle and you want to refer them to our program, contact Myra Bueno. You can reach her through email at myra@foothillunitycenter.org. And Myra is spelled M-A-I-R-A, myra@foothillunitycenter.org. And the phone number is 626-358-3486, 626-358-3486. That's if you want to make a referral for someone who is living in their vehicle. And then we want to make it legal. When we started that program, it was not legal because safe parking was not a permitted use for churches in Pasadena. So we started this under the radar. The city didn't know about it, but then the city found out. First, they just kind of looked the other way. Now we have a temporary conditional use permit, but we want to make it a permanent permitted use for churches here in Pasadena, make safe parking a permanent permitted use. So tomorrow at the Planning Commission, for those of you that are local, at 6:30 p.m., you can come in person or virtual by Zoom. And we need people to come and speak to the Planning Commission for safe parking to be a permanent permitted use for churches in Pasadena. And you can go to the city website, City of Pasadena website, where it says current agendas. Click on that and click all the way through until you find the Planning Commission agenda. That will give you the Zoom, the Zoom link, and also tell you where to go in person. You can also send emails to commentspc@cityofpasadena.net, commentspc@cityofpasadena.net, asking them to make safe parking a permitted use for churches in Pasadena. We also have our Congregational Land Committee. This committee consults with congregations to build affordable housing on their land. This is a professional expert committee, grant funded. They do feasibility studies. They can write an RFP, a request for proposal. They can help interview developers, do everything that a congregation needs to get ready to have affordable housing on their land. Nobody else does this. Our Congregational Land Committee does this. 70 congregations have shown interest throughout Southern California. 35 are in active conversation with our committee, and one in Laguna Beach has completed the whole process. They're ready to have affordable housing on their land. And I'm told that there has been no affordable housing built in Laguna Beach in 15 years. So this will be the first affordable housing built in Laguna Beach in a while. So some of their goals are to have 500 units of affordable housing planned on religious properties this year, by the end of this year. Also, we are mentoring, we want to have 2 teams outside of Southern California who are planning, are collaborating with religious congregations to have affordable housing built on their land. The 2 teams, we want to mentor 2 teams outside of Southern California. They could be from Oregon, Washington State, Denver, Texas, Northern California. Those are the places that have expressed interest, and some people are coming to Pasadena this spring to learn from our team. Now, one thing we run into is that a lot of congregations that want to have affordable housing on their land are not zoned appropriately. Either they're not zoned as residential, or they're not zoned to at a sufficient density to have affordable housing on their land. And if we go site by site, to try to change the zoning, it adds years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to the cost. So we're trying to do what are called religious overlay zones, where we change zoning across a whole jurisdiction. This has been done in Seattle. We're starting to do it in California. We did one in Sierra Madre, which is the sleepy, bucolic town right next to Pasadena. They did it. We did one in Pasadena. It was very modest, but we got something done. And we got it into the housing elements of a number of other Southern California cities. And also we're working at a state level to get it passed. The state bill right now is called SB4. And tomorrow morning, it will be in the Governance and Finance Committee of the Senate. And so if you're able tonight, this is our first call to action tonight. We need you to call these 2 senators, Maria Elena Durazo and Brian Dolly. Now, I've got on there the counties they represent, but you don't have to be in their county to call them, because when they serve on this committee, they represent all of us, not just their constituents. So for Maria Elena Durazo, you can call 916-651-4026. For Brian Dolly, 916-651-4001. And you can call them tonight, leave a message on their phone if you're able to do that. We really appreciate it. Affordable Supportive Housing Advocates is our next team, and they are our main advocacy team. We are really starting to feel the fruit of their advocacy, of the advocacy of this team. 69 units at Heritage Square South are under construction right now. This is 69 units of permanent supportive housing for seniors who've been experiencing homelessness. And this is an artist rendering of what it will look like. We got that approved several years ago, and it's being built right now at the corner of Orange Grove and Fair Oaks. It's going to be done by the end of the year. 69 units of permanent supportive housing for seniors who've been experiencing homelessness. We also got approved another 106 units after that in our Civic Center of senior housing. Seniors are the largest growing group of the homeless population in the Pasadena area. So this is very important. This team also helped get our Pasadena Religious Overlay Zone passed. And also in a larger coalition, this team helped get rent control passed in Pasadena. We've been working on that for years, and we got rent control passed as of this past December. So some of the goals for this team are to work on the state religious overlay zone, SB4, and we're looking at something called a transfer tax, which is a tax on high-end homes, very expensive homes and other high-value buildings, only when they sell, not every year, but just when they sell. And this was done in Los Angeles just recently and Culver City. And this could bring in tens of millions of dollars to Pasadena for affordable housing and tenant protections. So we need to do this in a larger coalition. MHCH is too small to do this. This has to be a ballot proposition because it's a tax. And so we are looking to form, we're exploring right now to see if there's a larger coalition that can work with us to do this. Our next ASHA meeting, by the way, everybody's invited to it, is Tuesday, May 2nd, 6 to 8 p.m. And it's going to be in combination with our Making Housing and Community Happen orientation series, MHCH 101. It's going to be module 3, how we do our work, a faith-based approach. And so the first half is going to be our meeting, second half is going to be the MHCH 101 presentation. And that's going to be led by our own Anthony Mendoza, not to be confused with Anthony Deduces, who works for Abundant Housing. That's a different guy. But here we have Anthony's picture, so you don't get him confused, so you know you're at the right meeting. He wanted me to use his picture because he didn't want us to confuse you. Anthony Mendoza is going to lead this session. So we will discover in the MHCH 101 orientation, discover how our faith-rooted approach has led to hundreds of units of affordable housing being built in Pasadena and beyond. And again, it's Tuesday, May 2nd, 6 to 8 p.m. You can go to makinghousinghappen.org/events to register to find the Zoom link and to register for that meeting. Next is our North Fair Oaks Empowerment Team. This is a group of churches on North Fair Oaks here in Pasadena who want to beautify and not gentrify that part of the city. They want to do it with better signage, more trees, sidewalk repairs. They've gotten a lot of the sidewalk repairs done. They've also gotten a traffic signal up there. They also want to get affordable housing. Some of the churches up there want to have affordable housing, and because of our Pasadena Religious Overlay Zone, some of them now are able to have affordable housing on their land. Also, they want a complete streets redesign. That's where you redesign the streets so they're good for pedestrians, cyclists, people using all modes of transportation. So the team is developing a vision plan, and this vision plan will help shape the city's specific plan for North Fair Oaks. A specific plan is a plan that the city has for various parts of the city, and the specific plan says what can happen in that part of the city. So our team wants to create a vision plan that will help guide or help shape, influence the specific plan that the city creates for North Fair Oaks. And tomorrow we have an opportunity to help out this team because the city is doing a traffic safety and walkability community meeting. That's going to be at La Pintoresca Park, which is at Washington and Fair Oaks, but it's going to be on the Fair Oaks side. The city will have charts by the grass at La Pintoresca Park on the Fair Oaks side, and we will provide the city with our ideas and input to make the streets safer for all users. That's 5 to 7 p.m. tomorrow night. So you could actually go there and then go to the Planning Commission at 6:30 if you want to do both of those things. We have a congregational network of more than 20 congregations in Pasadena that participate in MHCH. If you want your congregation to be part of that, contact me, Bert Newton. You can reach me by email, bert@makinghousinghappen.org, or call or text me 626-993-7958, 626-993-7958. That's if you want your congregation to be part of this network. So we also have these things called the Housing Justice Institutes, and these are city-specific institutes. Jill and usually one of our other staff, currently Lucero Garcia, they go into a city, they meet with people there for months. They do months of prep where they learn about the city, the housing landscape of the city, the history, and solutions that work for that city. And that leads to a one-day institute where they bring together a larger group of people. And then out of that is birthed a local housing justice group like MHCH. So Jill has done these in Denver, in North Carolina. Right now, they're putting one together in Long Beach here in Southern California. If you want a Housing Justice Institute in your city, contact Lucero Garcia. That's Lucero, Lucero, at makinghousinghappen.org. Lucero at makinghousinghappen.org. And that is does it for what's happening at MHCH. So now I want to introduce Patricia Herrera. She is the regional manager for the California State Council on Developmental Disabilities, San Bernardino Regional Office. Patricia has worked for close to 25 years in the field of developmental disabilities for city, county, and state programs, tackling service access and system change. So she is going to moderate the main part of our program. Patricia, take it away.
First thing, unmute. Thank you so much, Bert. I am so excited to be here because it's been a long time coming to bringing this together. And what excites me so much is that we usually have meetings, but we're talking among ourselves, the people who are working in the field of developmental disabilities. So I'm very excited to have a very mixed group with different backgrounds and our community and our churches. So I'm excited about that. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a background on the State Council on Developmental Disabilities, what role we play. Then I'm going to introduce our other speakers and kind of frame up what we are going to do this evening. So I'm going to start just telling you about the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. It's Congress established the state councils in every state and territory. The councils are authorized in the Developmental Disabilities Assistance and Bill of Rights Act of 2000. It's called the DD Act, to ensure that individuals with developmental disabilities and their families design and access services and supports that promote self-determination, independence, productivity, inclusion in community life. That's what the state councils are dedicated to. We're federally and state funded. The state council develops a 5-year state plan to implement the DD Act through 12 regional offices in California. The plan is developed with stakeholder input and is focused on addressing systemic barriers to employment, housing, education, and health and safety. That's what we're dedicated to. I'm moving a little faster than the slides, but I'm on a roll. I want to give you a little bit of an historical background at this point, because the developmental disability system has gone through different stages and different milestones. So, and somebody came on in the beginning when you were greeting and you talked about some of the history. So here in the 60s, the only solution that existed for people with developmental disabilities were institutions. And that was it. And for years, that was the only solution. The wait lists got very, very long, and parents came to say, this is not a solution. We want our children in our homes. We want our children in our community. And I'm really giving you a snapshot of what this history looked like. There were a lot of, the Kennedys were involved. There were a lot of movement. There were scandals in the institutions. Geraldo Rivera, one of the reporters, got in there, filmed in New York and on the East Coast, the things that were going on in these institutions. And out of that, that was the 60s. Out of that, in the 70s, came out the Lanterman Act, which established a robust system of community-based resources and services delivered through a network of 21 state-funded regional centers. And what happened with this community-based program, we went gradually from these institutions, they were downsized, they were called developmental centers, and we went to residential homes in the community. And that is where we are today with a crisis. We're in a housing crisis that escalates at the system, facing challenges of ensuring housing stability beyond residential care. Most of what the state has provided for individuals with developmental disabilities has been residential homes. It's the only option. And there's a lot of individuals that's not their choice. And you'll hear more about it as we go on with our evening tonight. Okay, so I'm gonna define developmental disabilities because it is a very specific group of individuals, and they need to be defined very well for this conversation or this forum tonight. So the Lanterman Act is the law or the legislation that described how the whole system would be run, and it defined what a developmental disability is for the state of California. There's two definitions, there's the federal and the state. I'm just going to talk about the state at this point. So it's a disability that originates before age 18. It continues and can be expected to continue indefinitely, constitutes a substantial disability. And then there's a definition of what substantial means. Substantial disability means significant functional limitations in 3 or more of the following areas. It could be in self-care, it can be in receptive and expressive language, learning, mobility, self-direction, capacity for independent living, and economic and self-sufficiency. So when individuals are come into the regional center system, they have to meet this criteria. And it's very specific that it cannot be solely a physical disability. It cannot be solely mental health or an emotional condition, that it has to be a developmental disability. There is a fifth category, a fifth category that talks about a condition similar to an intellectual disability or that has the same substantial circumstance. Okay, so I'm just going to go right now and tell you exactly why we're here and why this group or this population is very unique. Housing, the crisis is happening to many seniors, to veterans, to youth. There's so many groups that are impacted, and disabilities in general, everyone with a disability. But what this group in particular has that's uniquely vulnerable, there are 3 things that I think really stand out. 60% of adults with developmental, 63% of adults with developmental disabilities live in their home, live in their family home. Let me correct that, live in their family home with aging parents who often report elevated health problems. So this is the circumstance that we have, 63%. The other highlight here is that 8 out of 10 live in fixed income, relying completely on Social Security, SSI, supplemental income, and are unemployed. And the third very important point about our individuals with developmental disabilities is invisibility. What does that mean? That to the general public policymakers, legislative bodies, they assume that people with developmental disabilities are being served well in either residential homes or they're being just served. And it is so far from the truth. There is a system which in a few minutes, we're going to quickly go over the system, which is the Department of Developmental Services is the funding mechanism for the 21 regional centers. But at this point, I wanted to kind of frame how we're going to spend the next probably 20 minutes or so. We're going to have Daniel Schenkel, who is here with us. He is the president of the Lanterman Housing Alliance, an organization dedicated to this particular issue in our system. And he's also the president of the California Housing Foundation. He's going to give us some data some really good data points. He's going to go over funding mechanism. There is hope at the end of the tunnel. There is light. No, that's the saying. There is light at the end of the tunnel, that that funding can be made available for affordable housing and what we call carve-outs and these developments that you are all working on. We're going to talk about a model of housing, a community inclusion model that is being replicated, and you'll get to know this model. And we have Peter Mendoza, who is he actually works also for the state council, and he is in the Sacramento office, and he will tell you about his lived experience in inclusive housing. And then we have Chris Dentling. Chris is actually the person who works with Able Light and who has spearheaded that inclusive community development. The type of housing we're going to focus on today is affordable housing.
Patricia, can I interrupt you? The slideshow is showing some sort of split screen.
Yes.
Do you see that?
Yes.
For a second, somebody clicked on something that made it better, and then it went right back.
Okay.
Who's controlling the screen? Who's controlling the screen?
I am. Is that better?
No.
No.
Yeah, this is, yeah.
Let's do this then.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
you.
it's okay.
Is that better?
No.
If you can make it big.
If you
Why
go
is it
to display settings up top,
That's
Yeah, it's a
better.
little bigger. That's a little better.
That's
Yeah.
better.
and
Yeah.
if you, so right there, swap presenter view, that will get rid of the, because we're seeing the next slide as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
so, okay.
So yeah, go back and let's see, click on display settings.
So you like that less?
And then, oh, it should be swap presenter view, but it didn't take it away, huh?
No, because I haven't changed anything the entire time I've been doing it.
Somebody changed it for a second there, and it like went to this and then went back to the other. But this is better than well, now it's back to a small one.
Yeah, it went small again.
That is strange.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's good.
that's the best we've had. So
Okay.
Yes, we can. We can at least read it. Yeah,
let's
thanks.
go with that. Great. Okay.
Okay. So our focus is on affordable housing. There are other developments where they're called villages. They're being privately funded. People are fundraising for those efforts. Here in today's meeting, we're going to focus on affordable housing, and we're going to focus on the model that making housing and community happen. It's all about leasing the churches, leasing land for affordable housing, and it's about talking about carve-outs that our individuals with developmental disabilities can have available with, and this is where Dan comes in. So I'm just going to turn it
I'll
over to
pick up
Daniel.
here and really quickly go through the slides that I guess you'll just have to see twice and you'll know what's coming, and I'll pretend like you don't.
Okay.
This is just to look at a lot of the information that we've had historically has been very much anecdotal. And so one of the things that the system that serves people with developmental disabilities that's set up does really well is counts things. One of the things that it doesn't do is count things that people want to see. So you can see within the people with developmental disabilities, there are certain ones that are eligible for regional center services, and those that's the mechanism that the state uses to provide services for folks, but it hasn't historically done housing really well. Landerman Housing Alliance is an organization that my organization belongs to. We are a group of housing developers, regional centers, some funders, there's some banks involved, and stakeholders that are really trying to solve the problem of how do we provide the kinds of housing that people want, not necessarily the kinds of housing that it's simple to provide within the system. looking at some of the anecdotal evidence, there's this conversation that came up about how many people it is that are living with elderly parents. When you get to percentages, sometimes it doesn't seem like a big number, but when you look at the maternal age and consumer age as they're published by different entities, you see there's 44,000 homes that are needed. Just for folks that are right now living with parents where their mother is presumed to be older than 62. California Housing Partnership is another entity that we've had to go to because the system that we're working with within the regional centers and the Department of Developmental Services doesn't yet come up with the housing needs numbers the way that would be helpful. You can see that there is an astronomical number of people that are cost burdened that live in a household with an individual with a developmental disability. Cost burdened is specific in this instance. It means that more than 30% of their income is spent on housing. Severely cost burdened means that they're spending around 2/3 or more of their income each month just on housing. And then the last count, there was some conversation around homelessness. The continuums of care publish information about their point in time counts. We went through as a part of that count, they asked people whether they have a developmental disability, and that's as defined under federal law, which is similar to state law, but disabling condition can occur prior to 22 rather than 18. And so it's a little bit more inclusive in who can be captured in that number. It's also self-reported. And so some of the folks that
30 seconds
may or may not know that that's something that that they have. But you can see there's 14,000 people that are sleeping on the streets right now that believe that they have a developmental disability. The regional center system, the DDS system, has created a fund to try to resolve that. And you can see that they have so far, of the tens of thousands that we showed a need for, been able to, through this kind of pilot program, develop 305 units. They're hoping to grow this program, and we're hoping to help them with that. That's a hard stop on my end. And so one of the things that we're hoping is that this will be a mechanism that we can push to fund more fully through the state, and then also bring to developers or prospective developers of all kinds that are looking to serve people with developmental disabilities. Jim Morgan is the gentleman that runs the program at the state. He would be a great contact to reach out to. But you can also reach out to me. There's my contact information. And then Patricia would be a wonderful way also to get into that system. It's shared through regional centers, which can be a tricky system to interface with if you aren't used to it. But it's something that we can kind of walk you through, and relative to some of the other funding sources that exist, it's relatively painless. At this point, we want to change a little bit. There's a lot of things that this can look like, but we just want you to see a quick video that Able-Lite has put together about what it looks like for a few people that have been fortunate enough to access some of the developments that they have put together. So I believe, Bert, you have that video queued.
Anthony has it, so Anthony will.
Oh.
In Elk Grove, know this community is special.
You don't hear it?
Yeah, we can hear it, but there's some great
Neighbors and neighborhoods, beautiful parks, convenient shopping, and people who really care about each other. That commitment to caring sets Elk Grove apart. Here, people of all backgrounds and all abilities know they can be included, feel welcome, thrive. Today, there's a unique opportunity to extend a hand of friendship to people who are often overlooked, those who have an intellectual or developmental disability. That is what Able-Lite Cornerstone Village Elk Grove is all about. There are 6.5 million people in the US with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and yet there's a lack of affordable, safe, and accessible housing for people with disabilities.
Everyone deserves a place called home.
Able-Light, the John Stewart Company, and Light of the Valley Church are working to address this problem right here in Elk Grove. Cornerstone Village is a residential community open to people of all faiths that combines people with developmental disabilities with other members of the community in a welcoming, vibrant environment.
People with disabilities really want to be active and accepted and contribute to the community.
So our community, our town is excited about bringing affordable housing to a place in a community that's already caring and serving and walking with people.
But Cornerstone Village is more than just a place to live. It's a place to thrive.
The whole thing is, how do we help people thrive? What kind of resources do we have in the community to help people live at their best? And that's what I love about this. It's like the church has the world right on its doorstep right here. And we get a chance to serve and love people. And the people in the community has this resource of a church and all the resources that we bring as well to help them with their lives. And so that thing, you know, life is better together.
I have a 1-bedroom apartment, so I'm like free just to do whatever I want. I feel more stable. I feel more like at ease. It's awesome. Being here and showing everyone that I can do it, including myself, you know, showing that willpower, the strength, the courage. It's just been a blessing.
For the city of Elk Grove, it's a chance to make a powerful statement about inclusion and to be on the forefront of an important movement. To understand the impact of a place like Cornerstone Village, we need look no further than our first development in Victoria, Minnesota, where both the residents and the city are thriving.
My goal is to be more independent, and I feel like this is just a really great opportunity for me to do that. And I just feel really proud of myself.
Cornerstone Village is more than just an apartment building. They aren't the type of developer who just builds something and leaves. Their involvement, their mission of caring and connecting people have impacted our community in a positive way, and we are beyond excited to have Cornerstone Village in our community.
Every so often, a game-changing opportunity comes forward that helps a community define what it is today and what it aspires to be tomorrow. In this city of homes, we have a new opportunity today to welcome people home. Cornerstone Village and the diverse group of people who call it home will be an asset to the city of Elk Grove and a powerful statement for inclusion.
By supporting Cornerstone Village and getting involved, you'll be making lives better for many. So I would encourage you to really embrace this really groundbreaking project.
Awesome. We have Peter with us. It's all yours, Peter.
Thank you, Patricia, and I'm really honored to be here with you all. My name is Peter Mendoza, and I'm a community program specialist with the State Council on Developmental Disabilities, and it's wonderful to be here. You know, I want to commend the John Stewart Company, Light of the Valley Church, and Able-Light for really putting a wonderful project together in Cornerstone Village in Elk Grove. The previous speakers did a great job setting the table for this conversation. And in reflecting on what I wanted to say tonight, is that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are often left behind when it comes to housing. I should mention that I'm a wheelchair user. I do everything with the support of someone else or assistive technology. I have a wonderful life. I am living the dream of the Lanterman Act. My mother was one of those early parents who back in the 60s and early 70s was one of the people who fought for the system that supports our community today. Housing, as you all know, is a national problem. But for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities who are often living on supplemental security income, which is very low income, they're not able to navigate the housing system or to have enough money to be able to move away from their families. The regional center system is spending a lot of time on succession planning, trying to come up with ways to help people with intellectual disabilities move away from their parents. While people with intellectual and developmental disabilities do need many supports and services, they are capable of living on their own with services and support. The promise of the Lanterman Act is a civil rights act, which means, in simple terms, is that people with developmental and intellectual disabilities have the right to live life just like those without disabilities. Yet, through housing, this is denied. I am blessed. I've always worked hard, but the reason I have stable housing today is because of my late mother, who made sure I had housing provided for me so I would be safe and have this place to call home. A place to come home, having a home, I believe, is a civil right. But again, the civil right is being denied. So coming to you all tonight, it is my hope that we can embrace inclusionary housing, set aside for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, people who are non-disabled as well. Cornerstone Village addressed the needs of people without disabilities, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, veterans, and also people who were unhoused. It is a true community. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities want to give back, want to contribute. We can contribute just like everyone else, but we're denied the opportunity in many cases to have the basic right that everyone should have, a place called home. And there's statistics according to the Housing and Urban Development program that 40% of the people that live in shelter, that are staying in shelters, are people with disabilities. I used to be on the Housing Choice Voucher program many years ago. And when I got on many years ago, you could get a voucher right away. Now it takes anywhere from 5 to 10 years to get a Housing Choice Voucher. And the Housing Choice Voucher program is a program through the Housing Authority that pays a rental subsidy based on income to support people, older adults, people with disabilities, and people are low income. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities can't wait that long. People want to live on their own with supports. They have the right to live on their own with support. We've come so far with the Lanterman Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and we say that people with disabilities have civil rights. And we do, but we also need to have a place called home. Many people with intellectual and developmental disabilities for years worked in sheltered workshops. California passed a bill last year signed by the governor, SB 639, that makes it unlawful to pay a person with an intellectual or developmental disability below minimum wage as of 2025. The council played a strong role in getting that legislation passed. So you have people with intellectual and developmental disabilities who have been subject to generational poverty because they weren't given the opportunity to have economic opportunity. California is working to change that, to advance competitive integrative employment for people with developmental disabilities, which means that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities have the right to earn the same wages, people without disabilities doing the same job, work with people without disabilities in an integrated setting, and have a right to benefits and the other benefits available through work as people without disabilities. But we have a long way to go.
Yes,
So,
yes, yes.
So I know I have to close, so I'm going to close with this. So I'm making an impassioned request that first I want to commend you all for being here, but we really need to work together to really address this civil rights barrier for our community. And I do appreciate the honor of being able to speak to you tonight.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Chris.
Good job.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Detling. My pronouns are he, him. Let me share my screen here. Thanks for the opportunity to be here and share some more information about Cornerstone Village in Elk Grove. This multifamily affordable housing community that's planned in Elk Grove, California, outside of Sacramento, is in partnership with Light of the Valley Lutheran Church. They're the landowner and are making land available for this development, and then they'll also partner on helping build community. And the John Stewart Company, a affordable housing developer that will own and operate the building. So a little bit about Able-Lite and our inclusive housing model. Cornerstone Village is the vision for Cornerstone Village is about creating communities for people of all abilities. And our pillars are to be inclusive, to build community, to design for independence, using things like smart home technology to reduce barriers for independent living, support individual choice in where people live and the services that they provide, respond to local needs, and if I can move this out of the way, which you probably can't see, really be innovative and creative in how we do it. So as I mentioned, this proposed development will be in Elk Grove, a suburban community of Sacramento. And here's the location. And this is on the inset is an aerial view of Light of the Valley Church and the land that is underutilized and some parking area that's underutilized. Many of you in the room know what that's like, are involved with faith organizations that have excess land, excess parking. It's just the world that we're in right now. And it's great that we're all coming together to think about how we can utilize that resource to create affordable housing that's inclusive for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So a couple renderings so you can get a sense of what the building will look like, buildings will look like. So in the middle of the site is the church, and the parking will be reduced to a smaller area around the church. And then there'll be land set aside for 8 buildings surrounding a central building. And in total, there'll be 84 units, and it's a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. These are all affordable, and the financing will primarily be provided by the low-income housing tax credit program. Here's some elevations, and you saw some of these in the video. And as I mentioned, 84 units. The unit mix is 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, 50% ones and about 25% 2s and 3s. And 63% of the units will be affordable for families with children. 25% of the units will be set aside for people with adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And 11% of the units will be set aside for people experiencing homelessness. A little bit about the financing structure. So about half of the development will be supported by debt. So a first mortgage, just like you have on your home, debt that we have to pay back, every month for many years. And then hopefully a lot of you are familiar with the low-income housing tax credit program. That's a federal program that provides reduction in federal tax liability for individuals, corporations that invest in affordable housing. So 38% of the project budget will be supported by federal and state tax credits. About 7% will come from deferred loans and grants. And I just wanted to break out this last one. California DDS through the Alta California Regional Center has committed $2.1 million, about 4% of the budget, from program funds that Dan mentioned to help make this project a reality. So in total, the project's about $50 million. And describe a little bit about our partners. Again, Light of the Valley is the landowner and has brought this group together to redevelop some underutilized land and really create something wonderful out of that challenge. And I mentioned that they'll, in addition to that, being the catalyst for this development, they're also, will be a neighbor, a supportive neighbor, and will support the community in lots of different ways. And Pastor Jay Reed is on the call today in the room if folks have questions for him about whatever you may have. And the John Stewart Company is a California developer, affordable housing developer. They'll own the building and do the property management. And then we're partnering with lots of community partners, family advocates. Many of you on the call mentioned that you have adult children with intellectual and developmental disabilities and really are looking for that next housing opportunity for your adult children when you are unable to provide care for them or when they want to have the opportunity to live independently outside their family home. Another partner is the Regional Center, Alta California Regional Center, and the State Council on Developmental Disabilities, Project RIDE, and an organization called Elk Grove Heart. And so quick presentation, but I'll be available for questions.
Excellent.
There's a couple other folks that have some comments that they'll make, and then I'll be available for Q&A.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Excellent. So yes, bravo. I just wanted to point out that I have several colleagues from the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. We have a dedicated group that meets every month, totally focused on moving that needle in affordable housing for people with developmental disabilities. And we represent, we're members of different parts of the state, and they're here. David Grady's here. There he is. He runs the group, and Renee Bauer is part of it. But these are the thinkers that I get to work with every day at the State Council. So thank you so much for being here. We're ready for, I don't know, Bert, if you chat, if there's something in the chat that we need to answer, or we just raise hands and go around. I can start by just getting hands. While
there was one question for
yes.
Chris. It was asking how many acres that your project is going to be.
That's a great question. Pastor Jay probably knows off the top of his head. I think it's around 3.5 acres.
Great. And you had no problem with the zoning, the density or anything?
No, the community, Elk Grove was quite supportive. It's in a community that has some other multifamily in the neighborhood. So the density is consistent with the area.
Excellent.
That's one of the challenges with developing on church land, is that churches are often in single family neighborhoods, and you can get a lot of pushback from single family neighbors resisting density.
Right. So yeah. Okay. So any other questions people had? That was the only one in the chat.
Okay, Jolene.
Yes, I just wonder, so we're still in the rather early stages of working at our church on a low-income housing project, but I wondered why you'd be carrying a mortgage on this. I mean, that's not the plan. We're working with with the Arroyo group, with this group that that Making Housing Happen talked about, you know, will guide us through this process, but we don't end up with a mortgage. So are you getting the right guidance? I guess is my question.
You know, there are a couple different ways that the low-income housing tax credit program is structured. One is 9% credits that provide about 70% of the total capital stack, 70% of the total project cost, give or take, and then state tax credits on top of that. And then there's the 4% credits that provides about 30% of the total financing. And so we're utilizing the 4%, or this project will utilize the 4% credit. The debt is below market interest rate debt from the state. It's not secured yet, but it should happen in the next year. You know, and the interest rate on that is like 0.5%. So that enables it. You know, we still have to pay principal back and some interest, but it makes the project more affordable. And you know, and we do have, the project does have some units that serve people with higher incomes, you know, still affordable units, but units that aren't all, the buildings are not all at 100% at 30%, for example. And a development that would be 100% supportive housing, serving people at 30% or 40% of the area median income probably couldn't support any debt because the rents would just be too low.
Okay, been watching hands going up, and Jill, and then Tom, and then Kimberly. Go ahead, Jill.
I just want to respond to that good question you have, Jolene. And yes, we're working with you. You're not going to have any mortgage or debt. So the gentleman who did such a great presentation, Chris, he's speaking from the perspective as the developer and what the debt they incur as a developer. And he's talking about the finances that the developer incurs and how they go about paying that back. And so as far as the church, the way it works with a church in our committee, we're able to get income for the church through the long-term ground lease. And so you're not going to pay anything if you partner with a developer who takes care of all the finances, and then they will pay you for the long-term lease of the land. So that's our model. So don't worry, you're not going to be getting debt, but it's the developer that will take
I wasn't worried about us. I was worried about them.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Okay.
I think what I'd like to say, just that there's different models, and this is teaching you to look into those different models and different options. I've been through some other efforts that I've heard in the past, and also that involve some churches, but there are different models and they're set up differently. So it's very important to have that information to know what you are going to be working with. Tom, you had your hand up.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Terrific. I'm so glad I came to this webinar. Thank you very much for the work you guys are doing. Just outstanding. The question I had for the developer was, this is a rental to the adults, not a buy the housing unit, correct?
You broke up a little bit. Could you say that again?
Yes, this is a rental for the families and the adults that go into the building, not they are buying the house or
Exactly.
the apartment.
They're rentals.
Okay.
Exactly. Yes.
And then the
rentals.
rents themselves are determined by the property owner, which would be the developer, because you manage it, right?
Yeah, John Stewart companies will own and manage. Yes.
Correct. And then, so would their rent be continued to be market increase, or would that be fixed depending on the city they are in Elk Grove, for example?
Yeah, the rents are an affordable rent based on the income level. So some of the units are affordable at 30% of the AMI, some at 40, some at 50, some at 60. So the rent levels are significantly below market rent, but there are different levels of rent.
And then the question about I saw that we have the low income and that we have intellectual disability, development disability, the band there, that's like 20% to 100% occupancy. Would that 20% have a different kind of rent other than, or would be the same based on their income? Would they get a special consideration for being in the ID and DD community?
Yeah, the rents for the 25% of the units set aside for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities will be, for the most part, set at the 30% AMI level, so a very low rent. You know, it won't be based on a percentage of their income, but it's been our experience that folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities have sufficient resources to pay that 30% rent.
So the question that I have for the SCDD folks or DDS folks on this webinar, do you know if any of the regional centers can subsidize their rent through either direct service or through self-determination options?
Rent is not paid for at all in the system.
Got it.
But and I'll let Dan, he knows more than I do on this. What DDS does is they add money to the capital stack. They add money to construction to, and you saw theirs has 2.1 million. So that's what they do. They're not doing, and that's the ask here today. We're trying to get the Department of Developmental Services to do more of this. They're doing it far in between, but this is where I think the families, once again, you know, community members, churches, we all need to put that pressure a little bit to, and legislators to please put more money into that development. And Dan, you know, you went through it really fast, but regional centers don't pay for rents, but they pay the other way. And then carve outs can be made to have, you know, 10 apartments, 20 apartments, whatever the math works out. And it becomes inclusive as well, because they come into inclusive communities, and it is a great model to look into.
Right. No,
Yeah.
I'm really happy with it. But another question would be, if I had, you know, son or children going into that program as an IDD person, will there be a support structure or circle of support that's be available within the building or in the immediate access? And
I'll answer that.
Will these be in the one wing, or would there be one floor, or would there be spread out in the building so that
I'll answer part of the
they are taken
question.
care of?
Yeah, it's a very good question. The regional center system provides what's called supported living services. So individuals, and that is funded. That is funded through self-determination or the traditional model. And that's supported living service, which is individualized based on what that individual needs. And so that is taken care of. How they set it up, wings and all that, I think it's not about separating people at all. It's about, you know, having people together, live together. And I don't think there's that kind of separation. But individuals, no matter what level of support they need, this is where you go to the regional centers and you make those requests, and they are listened to. Yes.
So the project itself doesn't provide the services for the residents, for IDDD residents, but each of the residents have their own circle of support provided. What we are just providing is like a integrated living environment, roof overhead, a room they call their home, a home called their own, but not service supported. It's individual supported. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, yes and no. So for the most part, this would be like renting any other apartment unit. If someone wants to live independently and has services that they can bring with them to live independently, then that will work. Able-Light does provide supportive services in California, but folks can choose who they want to work with. The difference here is that this is really envisioned as an inclusive community where the entire community is intentional about living together, supporting people with disabilities and without disabilities, And there will be some on-site programming that will provide some extra support and services. And then, of course, through Light of the Valley Church, will also help with community building. So it's different in that way. But it's not like it's 100% supportive housing development where all the services are on site and you get everything that you need for the most part there. This is more envisioned as independent, inclusive housing.
Yes,
And
okay.
I'll give you a quick example of rental assistance. Our development in Victoria, you saw the video that highlighted that development, Victoria, Minnesota. 20% of those units are set aside for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and the city has provided tax abatement. So that reduces our operating cost, and we can use, and because of the reduced operating cost, we reduce the rents. So it's almost like a private rental assistance program for people with disabilities. Lots of ways to create rental assistance and rents that are more affordable. We talked about project-based Section 8. There's HUD Section 811. Lots of different approaches. And every community, and every project will be different, I think.
I'm sorry, Kimberly, you have had that hand up for a long time. I'm so sorry, got distracted. Go for it, Kimberly.
It's okay, thank you. My name is Kimberly Leisman. I live in Chico, California. And so is this housing for individuals with disabilities that want to move away from home and live on their own, or individuals like me that live on our own but are struggling to live on their own? Because myself and a whole bunch of my other peers that live on their own are struggling really bad to even live. Like, I have to pay bills and I don't even have enough money to get my medication I need because of rent is going up, and I cannot get no help. A lot of my peers cannot get any help.
Kimberly, do you live in an affordable housing development or do you live in a market rate development?
I live in a regular apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the rents here will be more affordable. And so the idea is, yes, people who want to live independently, away from their families. That's the target market, but then also folks like you who are already living independently, but in a housing situation that's too expensive. This would be a good next move for folks in your position and your friend's position. And I feel like I've been talking a lot. Dan also does this work through his organization. And I just want to make sure that Dan has an opportunity to jump in.
No, you're doing an amazing job, Chris. Keep going. I think Anthony did have a question though about wanting to hear from the pastor in Elk Grove.
Yes.
About how the church came to decide to use their that property in this way. I don't.
Pastor Jay, right?
know where there's.
Yep, that's right.
Put you on the spot. I think he's still on somewhere.
Yeah, he's on, but he might have stepped away for a second.
Okay.
So put a pin in that. Maybe Julian, you had a question.
How will you select the residents? Is it a lottery based on need, like most, like many housing?
That's to be determined, but for the most part, there'll probably be a waiting list that opens up, and folks will apply to the interest list for the waiting list, and then there'll be a lottery. We're really early stages. This hasn't started construction yet, so a lot of those decisions haven't been made, but that's typically how it works.
And, okay, thank you.
So Kimberly raised her hand again.
Yes, I have a question. With the churches building these housing developments, would the people that are going to rent, do they have to belong to that church, or is it open to anybody? like any religion.
Yeah, I can speak for Elk Grove Lutheran Church and Cornerstone Village. You definitely do not have to be a member of the church. The development, will meet fair housing, federal fair housing regulations, and we can't discriminate based on people's faith. But I'll let other folks, other faith organizations chime in.
Jill?
Yeah, I mean, what Chris said is absolutely true. There's no discrimination based on faith or sexual orientation or anything, and it has to be available, to anyone. So yeah, anytime a church might build affordable housing on their campus, they have to understand that they can't put their own people in there. They may have people in their congregation that would qualify, but they need to sign up and be on the list and the waiting list just like everyone else, and they don't get any priority over anyone else. So
the one priority that I'll mention is that there'll be a priority for people with histories of homelessness and people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So there'll be a preference for those applicants over a general occupancy family.
Mm-hmm. Because of the funding source. You're required to do that.
Yes, exactly.
To close, I do want to turn it back to Dan. Dan, so you can tell us what the, and more, not so fast like we did a little bit earlier, what is the ask of the Lantern Housing Alliance so that we can get behind this? And can you just imagine how many faith-based churches out there, temples exist that they have land, and with a group like Making Housing and Community Happen, that they help make this happen actually, and that we have individuals that need this. I mean, it's such a win-win all around. And there's such a need. What I really wanted to see, and at the State Council, what we've been talking about almost every month, is to make sure that our individuals with developmental disabilities are in the mainstream, that they're considered, that a church may say, this is a group that I want to serve, because we're not. It's veterans, which they, individuals that need a lot of help too. And so it's just integrating more and more the different groups that need assistance. And so this is wonderful that we're able to do this. It's statewide. And so in any community where a church comes forward, or a temple, or any faith-based community effort comes forward and says, I have land, I'd like to look into affordable housing, that there is good possibilities that this can happen. So that's all I wanted to say, and I'm turning it over to Daniel.
I think you're turning it over. I'm thunderless. You've taken it all. Yeah, first of all, it sounds like Pastor Jay is trying to work out how to get you an answer, Anthony. And so, Jay, if at some point you cut me off, that's quite all right. I think your answer might be more interesting to the group than what I've got. But
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm in my shop and I can't figure out how to make the video work, but I managed to make the sound work. So if it's a good time, I'd answer that question.
Yeah. So I think if you heard the question, it's just about how the church came to this as a use of the land on the property there.
Yeah. So we used to have a high school that went bankrupt, and so we ended up with a little bit of debt. And so we're looking for creative ways to handle that. And the Able Light company came to us a few years back with this idea, because they wanted to start and say, what a great partnership it would be if a church that was already there, already knows how to do community, could embrace this kind of a community as well. So over the last couple of years, we've talked about it, and kind of work with the congregation, saying, hey, we need to figure out how to shift our ministry a little bit to learn these folks, as far as the intellectual and developmental disabilities, but also some of them are going to be low income, and there's also a homeless component to it as well. And that's what we're called to be as a church, right? So we've had conversations, a lot of vision talk, a lot of, this is what really a church needs to be in a community that's not spoken for. We need to be the voice and to work with other resources. So our folks are getting excited about it. The John Stewart Company brings the design and the money, and Able-Lite brings kind of this guiding part. So it's a partnership for us that help us to be part of this community. So that's kind of the process that happened.
Yes. Thank you, Pastor Jay. Okay. Dan, any last remarks?
No, just I've put my contact into the chat, as well as Jim Morgan, who works at the Department of Developmental Services and oversees that little 4% piece of the funding. One of the things that we're hoping is that the last time that they went through a funding round, they had 6 to 10 times more people ask them for money than they had money for, which is unfortunate for those of you that are hoping that you are going to get some money out of it, because it's unfortunately kind of become a little bit competitive. But we're hoping that in the next year, based on that, we can make the case that they really need to start funding this more robustly. So those of you that are here through your state council connections, we would love to have you, when your regional centers put out their kind of community outreach requests, that you would let the regional centers know that housing is important. Inclusive and low income housing is important. And for those of you that are developers, our goal is that we can make a case that this is a population that that needs to be served, that in developing housing for this population, we can be doing kind of two goods. Be doing a good to meet the housing need, and also in service of a population that is kind of the most vulnerable of all of the categories that they fall into. We're finding that people with developmental disabilities who are also homeless often struggle the most to access the kind of generic homeless resources. People that have a developmental disability and also physical disability often struggle to access those resources for people more broadly with disabilities. So we're really hoping that we can make the case to the state that a part of what they need to do in providing the kind of best independent life that they promise to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities through the Lanterman Act, that they'll recognize that housing needs to be a piece of that. And so my goal is that in the coming years, we'll be able to come back to you having been successful and really trying to get some money out the door. So don't lose track of the contact. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to answer additional questions that you may have that there wasn't the time for, but I really appreciate all that you're doing and your willingness to kind of engage with the state council and with the Housing Alliance.
Thank you, Dan. Bert, it's back to you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks for these great presentations for Patricia and Dan and Peter and Chris. Thank you so much. This is very, very helpful and very powerful. Now we're going to end up, Jill is going to bring a final reflection.
Thank you, Bert. Can you hear me? No?
Yep,
Can you
we can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, I wasn't sure. All right. So just wanted to first start by saying how much I appreciated tonight. I've learned a lot, and I hope everybody has. And so this has just been a great opportunity. So thank you, Patricia, especially for putting all this together for us. Today, I was talking to my amazing husband, Anthony, and he reminded me of some really important things I wanted to share with you. He said that the measure of any society is how we treat the most vulnerable. And he also reminded me that at the beginning of the Holocaust, this is something I did not know, but it started with the idea of mercy killing. And yes, it was for the very population we're focusing on tonight, to help to get people out of their misery. Can you imagine a society coming to that point? And I think it's really interesting when we look at Jesus and the words he spoke, because he really misses no words when it comes to how we treat the most vulnerable among us. We started off with that point when Bert opened us up with a reflection. And but I wanted to share some of the points that Jesus made. He often uses hyperbole to help us really deeply feel the results of our choices so that we can learn and also to know that he really meant business. So I was thinking about Mark chapter 9, verse 42, and it says, whoever shall offend one of these little ones that believe in me, and it's better for them that a millstone was hung around his neck and that he were cast to the sea. And I think he's not saying we should do this, of course, but he's showing us the seriousness of how those we treat in a way much less than they deserve. And so by including those most vulnerable among us, I believe we are indeed including the very people that Jesus will want us to include. There's so many different ways we practice exclusion without even realizing. When we gossip, it's like betraying someone. And when we minimize someone or think that they should change for us rather than us try to accommodate those most vulnerable that often can't change, and yet we expect them to. And so all of this creates an unfair advantage, and we're not just hurting them, we're hurting ourselves as well. We're hurting society. So, but when we honor those among us most vulnerable, God is honored. And so tonight we've been honored. We've been honored to host this Housing Justice Forum, to seek to meet this essential need in society. And so I hope that many listening tonight will take to heart, and even those that might watch this video later, and that they will consider including, and even if it's 10, 20% of the units for those that are experiencing intellectual or developmentally disabled people, then that would be a beautiful thing, especially if the church took the lead in this in the same way this church in Elk Grove has done. May that be multiplied many, many times over throughout our state. So I want to just thank you again for being with us this evening, and we're going to close out the evening and end the recording. But if some of you want to stick around and talk longer, we are going to make ourselves available right now. So thank you.